Educational Director of Access to Love SF, which is a patient advocacy team that has been going strong now for 15 years. We're 110% disabled patients. We are mostly a people of color organization, filled with strong women as well. And we recently lost our community space that we had for almost a decade due to, well, unfortunately, we were located 2 blocks away from Twitter. So we suffered sort of 3 years of rent increases that we somehow managed to, get more donations for it, etc. The last round of rent increases was unbearable, and then we found out that the entire building had been sold. So now we are a homeless patient advocacy team. And where we are tonight, I want to say just a little bit about, this is the Eric Asada Community Center. And Eric Asada was a Latino leader in the mission who ran for district supervisor. And Access of Love at that point was kind of like, we like all 3 candidates. We like David Campos, we like Mark Sanchez, and we like Eric Asada. We were actually like, why don't we just put aside electoral politics and put the 3 vatos in the office and get some good stuff done and not play into the system. And none of them liked that idea. So, and then shortly after the race, as you know, Supervisor David Campos became supervisor, and he became a great ally for low-income patients. Any of the candidates would have been great allies for medical cannabis patients. The mission traditionally, for many years, was Tom Amiano, who was one of the few people way back in the day who was willing to take a risk to even talk about cannabis policy. We're still running into folks who don't even want to touch our issue. Don't be fooled,
All the time.
And shortly after the race, Campos ran the race, Eric Asada passed from a heart attack, I believe. And so this center has a plug-in for civil rights. It has a plug-in for a lot of issues of liberation that I believe everybody here has their heart plugged into or probably wouldn't be attending our event. It also houses the Freedom Archives, which is archiving and storing many of the different civil rights movies, footage, even going back to, I talked with one of their staff members today. They have stuff going back to like 1929 or so. So just to kind of dial us in where we're sitting in, and this is the second time Access to Love has hosted an event here. Unfortunately, the first event we hosted after we lost our space was a memorial, and it became really clear to us that when you lose a community space, it has a big effect on how you can gather your community. And while we had our community space, we also suffered several attacks from the industry. So it's interesting to try to kind of plug into the civil rights aspect of cannabis. And while we're looking at what's put out there as cannabis legalization piece, Prop 64, what we're really looking at, is how do we decode this? How do we really understand this? Because until actual people are involved in putting policy together, we have to decode policy because it's put together by lobbyists. And lobbyists are paid by people that can afford to pay them. And the interesting sort of journey that Access of Love went through with this upcoming state ballot is that many of us were proponents of a community-based ballot called MCLR. And we became the first open source, so anybody could plug in online and look at the policy as we were creating it. And we became the first open source created policy to be turned into the state. And we turned it in, of course, on 4/20. Unfortunately, what happened was you had about 20 or so community ballots that came from all different areas in California tried to enter and tried to compete. And at the very last moment, we had a slapdown come when Sean Parker entered the room, the Drug Policy Alliance, which is a very affluent lobbyist organization, and said that, you know, and Sean Parker is the guy who did Napster and Facebook, and he's worth billions of dollars, and all he had to say was he was going to give a little bit to the lobbyists and to Gavin Newsom and Scott Wiener's piece, Prop 64, and all of a sudden, all of the community ballots lost any hope of our funders. Our funders just left the table because they figured, I can't compete with a billionaire going in with, you know, this team. So then we waited to read the policy. We're like, well, maybe there's some hope. Maybe we'll come out with something that, you know, is going to be fair to everybody. Because look, we had all these community ballots. Hopefully they'll grab from us. I mean, if they're going to rob us, at least take the good stuff, you know? Well, it became the only piece of policy that I read that had things that I think really are disturbing. And the first one is jail time.
That's right.
There is not a single piece that was turned in by any community grouping. So we had all these different teams turn in ballots. Not a single one had any jail time associated with it. Not a single one. Not a single one had anything regarding open containers and no smoking in public and fees and fines and, you know, so it kind of stopped right there for me. I cannot support anything that has jail time for cannabis because
No.
No one belongs in jail for weed.
I mean, I think we're all on the same page with that. And as we started to decipher it more, I ran across other people's decoding. And I first started reading Dragonfly's decoding with Prop 19, which was the ballot that failed many moons ago, came out. And I read your stuff about 19, and she was on the same page as Axis of Love. 19 was actually put together by some of the similar players, basically all the same players. And when I started to read Dragonfly's decoding, I saw a lot in it that wasn't being talked about by other people, including the recriminalization and its impacts on urban poor communities and people of color. I didn't see anybody else really, you know, going into how this was going to affect these demographics being retargeted. So we have Prop 47 that passed that helped us not target urban poor communities, and now we see something that's retargeting and recriminalizing. So, I mean, yeah, that's a lot really to stomach. And then I also had an interest of bringing.
Thank you, God bless you all.
Thank you. I also had an interest of bringing Lumena here to be able to, you know, really give us here in the city a little bit of information about how are folks feeling up north. Because remember, not only do we have Prop 64 coming at our smaller farms, we also have some bad legislation that already passed in our state building. So we have a lot to kind of rebuild and restructure. And then sometimes people just want to keep it within the state's borders, but what we have and what we can easily look to is Washington State, where a law has already been passed that has pushed out the medical providers and really limited and restricted the patient's abilities to grow and have collectives, which we're looking at here in California. We're looking at losing the right to collectively or communally grow our medicine which is the only way that many poor patients get a share of free medicine. So we brought down Steve Elliott here from Seattle, Washington, to give us a perspective of what happened. And so it's not like we don't have any history to look at. We have Washington State, which has already gone through a similar process by the same organization, Drug Policy Alliance, I believe, also forwarded the Washington law. So I want to open up the stage for Dragonfly, and then we'll just kind of go down the line and get some perspectives, and then we'll open up for some dialogue. Dragonfly?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Dragonfly de la Luz. I'm a writer. I write for several cannabis magazines, and I have since 2007. And of course, in the context of that writing, I'm constantly researching what's going on in the cannabis world with regard to just the industry in general and to different initiatives and what impact it can have on our communities. So I'd like to speak with you briefly about what impact Prop 64 could have on urban poor communities, not just African American, because as you know, well, a lot of African Americans don't live in urban poor communities. It's the urban poor communities that are targeted by the police. Hi, welcome. So the first thing I wanted to point out is that Prop 64 supporters have been wildly exaggerating and misconstruing the impact that the initiative would have on urban poor communities. The reality is, Prop 64 only legalizes 2 cannabis offenses that almost no one, including African Americans, ever gets arrested for. That's possession of 1 ounce or less. No one gets arrested for that because it's not an arrestable offense. As of 2011, anyone in California can carry 1 ounce or less, and the most that will happen is they'll get an infraction and a fine of $100, but even those are few and far between. And of course, the other thing that Prop 64 legalizes is the ability to grow 6 plants indoors. That's also a crime that's not, an offense that's not common in urban communities. It's just not. So the offenses, however, that urban communities of color are most likely to get arrested for are selling, possessing more than 1 ounce, and transporting. And those offenses would remain totally illegal under Prop 64, and not just illegal, but punishable by up to 4 years in state prison. This is not county jail, up to 4 years in state prison. Not for the first offense, but for the possibly second and or third offense, and it's up to the judge. And I think that's another issue, the fact that there's sort of this 3 strikes provision in Prop 64. And the 3 strikes laws in the United States are what have really decimated African American communities across the country. Because, well, who gets arrested for the same offense repeatedly? People that live in heavily policed neighborhoods. And so as much as proponents of Prop 64 say, oh, the racial disparity, it's so unfair, we can end it with Prop 64, it's actually not written to do that. In fact, to a large degree, it seems as though it's written, I don't know if it's intentional or not, I'm not going to claim that, but it seems as though it's written to not to the favor, but to the disadvantage of urban poor communities. To get to the racial disparity issue, I don't know if you guys have heard, the Drug Policy Alliance is constantly coming out with these new articles that other people like the Huffington Post or the New York Times then pick up and spread around. And there's this racial disparity issue, and it's true. No one can argue with the fact that African Americans and Latinos are arrested at a disproportionate rate than are white people, particularly with regard to cannabis. But to believe that Prop 64 is going to make a difference in that, that's where I take issue, because it's obviously not meant to. In fact, if we can learn anything from Washington and Colorado, racial disparity has not changed in either of those states since legalization. Black kids are still targeted at a much higher rate for arrest than white people are in Washington state. In Colorado, this disparity has increased.
This is crazy.
It is. It's insanity. African Americans are arrested at an even more disproportionate rate than before legalization in Colorado. And not only that, but here's another harbinger of what could happen in California. In Colorado, since legalization passed, intent to sell arrests have climbed by 50%.
Intent to sell.
Yes, yes.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's possessing a certain amount. Yeah, yeah.
Like thought crimes, you mean?
We have other things that.
I've got this 7 joints that in California possessing for sale. 7 joints and over is totally possessing for sale. It is under now. You got 7 joints and more.
Exactly.
That's my first blessing in the city.
That's true, that's true.
I'll take questions after we kind of hear from each speaker.
Yeah, that's true. What he was saying was that, that can be, for a cop, like the sort of indicia that a cop looks for is multiple baggies or something. So if you have multiple bags, even if it's under an ounce that you're allowed to carry, but 5 different bags, well, looks like you're trying to sell that. So there's so many ways that, that the police can circumvent the law to target urban poor communities. And considering, it's just hard, it's hard to see how that wouldn't happen here in heavily policed communities anywhere in California. So in a sense that Prop 64 would kind of let the rich get richer by selling weed legally because they can afford to buy the licenses that circumvent these prohibitions, while the urban and poor people of color would continue to be imprisoned and have their lives destroyed for doing the same thing. It seems to me that racial disparity in arrests would only increase because selling weed and other crimes related to cannabis would remain illegal for young, economically advantaged people of color. Another point that I'd like to make about the Drug Policy Alliance, the DPA, there's an article that came out a couple of months ago from them, written by them, and it's titled, "It's Not Legal Yet. Nearly 500,000 Californians Arrested for Marijuana." That's 500,000 people in the last decade. Well, oh really? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But I have to say, let's be honest, in the realm of drug policy, a lot has happened in the last decade in California. So consider these statistics. A decade ago, in 2005, there were 35,000 adult misdemeanor cannabis arrests. But after California downgraded possession of 1 ounce from a misdemeanor to an infraction in 2011, those numbers dropped by 93%. So as of 2014, 2,243 people only had been arrested for possession. What's more, even felony cannabis arrests are down tremendously. They dropped by 1/3 in 2014. And Normal's website says that that's because of the passage of Prop 47, which Shona mentioned, which downgrades several drug offenses from felonies to misdemeanors. So while the DPA attempts to discredit this notion that cannabis is essentially legal in California by claiming that thousands continue to be arrested, A, the numbers speak for themselves, and B, what she neglects to mention again is that none of these arrests are for offenses that Prop 64 would legalize. There is no one in jail for possessing an ounce or less.
Nobody.
0 people. 0 people. Prop 64 is not going to legalize selling and distribution, so people would continue to be arrested for that even under legalization. Selling small amounts, large-scale trafficking, growing more than 6 plants, possessing more than an ounce, all will remain arrestable criminal misdemeanors and or felonies if Prop 64 passes, punishable by anywhere from 6 months in county jail up to 4 years in state prison. And another thing to keep in mind is that misdemeanor convictions make offenders ineligible for government assistance programs. That includes student aid, that includes welfare and public housing. And so this would negatively impact urban poor communities more than any other. They'd be risking their homes just to try to participate in this illegal, just to be able to smoke legally, because apparently Prop 64 bans public smoking. So if you're not allowed to smoke in public and you live in government housing, you're probably gonna just like step outside on the porch or on the corner and have a smoke and expose yourself to arrest. So personally, I feel that urban poor communities might actually be better off now than they would be with Prop 64, primarily because of Prop 47 and the fact that possession is merely an infraction as it is. But with Prop 47 specifically, California is drastically reducing drug arrests in the prison population in the communities that are most damaged by harsh drug laws, with no convoluted corporate legalization initiative necessary. That's how I understand it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So now I want to hear a little bit about what's going on in Humboldt. You know, it's a little bit of a different community, but they're being dramatically impacted and will be impacted by Prop 64, but are already being impacted by MRSA, which is what has passed already through our state houses. So people should never think of this as only about Prop 64. You have to look at what has already passed through the state houses and the damage that that's done too. If we're looking at workarounds and what can we do, you know, first to stop it from passing, but if it does pass, we still have a lot of work to do, no matter which way it flows. We have a lot of work to do. So let's hear a little bit about first Humboldt Grace, your educational program, and also just giving us a little bit of a feel of what's going on.
Well, I guess I'll explain a little bit why, you know, I have any authority to sit here and speak in front of you all. My name is Lelania, and I do have a company. I'm considered a cannabis culture educator. And the reason that I enjoy that is because I've been in this cannabis culture for 46 years. I've played the role of the child, I've played the role of the patient, I've played the role of a provider to a dispensary, and I've played the role of a political leader, and I am now playing the role of a legitimate business person in the cannabis industry. And it's all very interesting. In my community in particular, we have many social and cultural issues that are just not even being engaged in part of these decision makings, which I believe need to be a part of it in order for us to move forward and keep healthy, good medicine available to the patients. Sorry, I'm not good at speaking. I get anxious. And right now, we're a community that has actually, I feel, in a very healthy way, maintained this plant and nurtured this plant and created multiple innovations that are being used throughout the world, not just for cannabis. And we did really well as a community. We knew all about the sharing economy. We knew all about how to work through disagreements, whether we liked each other or not. We knew that if we didn't work together, we did not survive. If you pissed off your neighbor, that was the end of it for you. Then when 215 came about, things started changing in the roots of this culture because it became about patients, but it also became about more of an economy than just supporting a lifestyle. Cannabis grew for the past 40 years because of a lifestyle. It was a lifestyle that taught how to live indigenously, how to live within nature, and the plant gave us the opportunity to do those things. It gave us the opportunity to build pulp mills and use solar energy and raise our kids off the grid and teach them how to sit here and stand up for themselves no matter what. And then for our community, when Prop 215 came in, we had a lot of different entities come in because Humboldt, Northern California was all of a sudden known, this is the place you can go grow weed and not go to jail. And it became an entirely different environment, different than the 90s, but a little bit more us against us, because it no longer was the loggers, law enforcement, and the alternative community. Now it's everybody is starting to fear. And what this conversation has done at this point in my community, and in the growing communities, is it's put a lot of people at opposition with each other that really don't have anything to disagree about. Because I think even in this room, I don't live in San Francisco. I love my mountains, but I bet we all agree that we want our kids to grow up in a way that we feel is loving and kind, and we want to live healthy lives, right? We all agree about that. And the things we need for that is a healthy community. We need clean air, clean water, clean food, and clean medicine. And cannabis has become this amazing opportunity, I think, to deliver all those vehicles. But it's just a piece of what really made this a medicine. And what I hope to see get integrated into all these political conversations more is the value structure that allowed patients to start becoming patients and making all these choices. I still don't know exactly how I'm going to vote yet, because things keep changing so fast. And I don't believe I should tell you how to vote at all. I do hope that we're all people of integrity who have had some pretty incredible experiences, because we have been fighting for this plant for a long time, that you will all vote with your hearts and what's best for you. And you know, one person, Prop 64 might be the best thing for them because that's what their focus is on. But we all need to prepare ourselves and come together, whether we're business, whether we're patients, whether we're farmers, and go back to those values of a sharing economy, and I've got chicken and you've got jam, let's come together and make a good meal. Maybe you log and I grow pot, but you know what? I ran out of fire last winter and you gave me some. And it's that mentality that allowed us to even have these conversations. And I really, my passion and my hope of being here is to get back to those basics again, so these conversations can be more open, and we can have more oppositions together, having healthy conversations. Because in Humboldt County right now, for me, it is a community that was based on all those values, and we are being torn apart by greed, by fear, by distraction. I get calls, we're being inundated by corporate America. People want our name, our story, our faces, our farms. We're like the new movie stars in the world. But we're movie stars that have been in hiding, and we've had to live double lives for a very long time. I feel, if we're politically speaking, that it takes to build really good things, it takes a lot of hard work. And I just don't know if we've really done enough hard work to go full-blown legalization. And maybe we need to take a little more time and have more open conversations that bring oppositions together.